All right, so as folks continue to join us this evening, we'll go ahead and start. Hello, I'm Julia at Politics and Prose. We're live with Caoilinn Hughes and Mona Awad discussing their books, The Wild Laughter and All's Well. You can follow the links in the chat to purchase the book directly from Politics and Prose. We would also like to thank our friends at the Embassy of Ireland, Solus Nua, and Georgetown Irish Studies this evening. If you have a question for these authors, feel free to use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the screen. We'll move to questions in the last portion of the hour, though we apologize in advance if we run short on time. Additionally, we're glad to offer closed captioning for the event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To enable captions, click the CC live transcript icon at the bottom of your screen. We do want to thank all of you out there for joining us. We are very grateful to our family of customers who keep our business and our spirits afloat. Now, without further ado, let me introduce these fantastic titles. In Caoilinn Hughes' The Wild Laughter, it's 2008, and the Celtic Tiger has left devastation in its wake. Brothers Hart and Cormac Black are waking up to a very different Ireland, one that widens the chasm between them and brings their beloved father to his knees. Facing a devastating choice that risks their livelihood, if not their lives, their biggest danger comes when there's nothing to lose. And in Mona Awad's All's Well, Miranda Fitch's life is a waking nightmare. The accident that ended her burgeoning acting career left her with an excruciating chronic back pain, a failed marriage, and a deepening dependence on painkillers. And now she's on the verge of losing her job as a college theater director. Enter three strange benefactors who have an eerie knowledge of Miranda's past and a tantalizing promise for her future, one where the show goes on, her rebellious students get what's coming to them, and the invisible, doubted pain that's kept her from the spotlight is made known. Caoilinn Hughes is an Irish writer. In addition to The Wild Laughter, she is also the author of award-winning titles like Orchid and the Wasp and Gathering Evidence, and many other works of short fiction. She is the 2021 Writer Fellow at Trinity College, Dublin. And Mona Awad is the author of Bunny, named a best book of 2019 by Time, Vogue, and the New York Public Library, and is currently in development for film. Her new novel, All's Well, has been named a best or most anticipated book of summer by Entertainment Weekly, O Magazine, Goodreads, and many more. She teaches fiction in the creative writing program at Syracuse University. On behalf of Politics and Prose, please join me in welcoming Caoilinn Hughes and Mona Awad. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That's a lovely introduction, and lovely to be with you this evening. Hi, Mona.
Hi, Caoilinn. It's such a pleasure. I'm so excited.
So what we decided to do is to open with a reading each, and I think Julia's description of the book was probably all attendants need to know, but maybe just in case you weren't really paying, in case it's floated out of your mind already, it's called The Wild Laughter, and it's a kind of state of the nation family saga, love story type mishmash. It's set on a potato farm in the wrack and ruin of post-crash Ireland. And the years following 2008, and Doherty Black, known as Hart, lives at home with his ailing father, working the bankrupt farm and helping his much-loved father, who he calls the chief. And the brother has left, the first person in their family to go to university, and he's left home and he's kind of become an entrepreneur. And there's a fierce rivalry between the brothers, but in the novel they have to come together and make a choice that will affect the family's future. So I'll just read from the opening, and I'll read either 2 or 3 pages, depending on the vibes that I can pick up, which are so easy to pick up from this little screen. So you don't need to know anything about the narrative voice, except it's from the perspective of a 30-something man living in Roscommon, which is a landlocked county. The night the chief died, I lost my father, and the country lost a battle it wouldn't confess to be fighting. For the no-collared labouring class, for the decent, dependable patriarch, for right of entry from the field into the garden. Jurors were appointed to gauge the casualty. They didn't wear black. Do they know black is flattering? The truth isn't. They kept safe and silent. I didn't. When is a confession an absolution? And when is it a sentencing? I'd like to find out. I suppose there's only one outcome for souls like us. Heavy-going souls, the like of mine and the long-lost chiefs, and not a good one. But I'll lay it on the line, if only to remind the people of who they are. A far cry from neutral judicial equipment. Determining the depth of rot that's blackening the surface can't always be left to deities and legislators. Sometimes what's needed is to tie a string around the tooth and shut the door lively. 2. He was a bright young thing, my brother, Cormac. His mind was a luxury. The face was rationed, it must be said, but there's not a body with everything. Part T-Rex, part pelican. Picture that menace of features. Close-eyed, limb-chinned, skin thick as the red carpet he imagined laid down beneath his wellies. Tall as the door he expected to be let in. When he was 12, he looked 20. The mind was ahead too, as I said. The odd girl went in for such a harrow of a fella. The odd girl now, not the even, on account of his brains and his chesty conduct. Not that he was liberal with his cleverness, but there was the atmosphere of it. Knowing at any moment something you'd say would be turned inside out like a child's eyelid to traumatize you, to show you the violence behind it that you never meant. Or maybe you did. As I say, I didn't resent him his mind. Early on, its potential was fearsome, but he cached it away too long until it curdled. He could have his intellect. I had the looks. The chief's mud-coloured locks, yellowing now like a stack of cut grass drying out for haymaking. Hey, square skull, cultured nose, the kind of eyes that might be described as pea and mint soup, best served cold. I was shorter than my brother by a foot, but divvied up as good as David. I'd the emotions of every girl in the County Roscommon over a barrel, a fact he found hard to swallow, in spite of, or maybe because of the pelican chin. Excepting gobshites, I liked people, and I was well liked for no good reason as far as Cormac was concerned. I'd zilch to contribute in the way of knowledge or guile or points for the home side. And sure, how else can a person be of use? Sport lent him an absence note for the farm work that needed doing, for the care work, for the life sentence. His absence meant my containment. Stay put, Hart, he was telling me. Stay a mile wide of my circle. There's only so many circles in a town the size of a souterrain. What I did and said reflected on him, so he wanted the sticks brushed from my hair, the charm wiped off my face. He wanted me capable of summing sums and changing tires. To be mad on mechanics, Newtonian and Fordian both. To know a stock option hadn't to do with cattle. But I wasn't after his or his bio's approval, that panel of experts. Where we're from, infants get swaddled in Hessian sacks. I never bought into an alternative reality, no matter how low the interest rates limboed on the new millennium. No matter how you could go the whole way to Dublin on a test drive and no one would lambaste you or demand a tenner for petrol. Cormac did clinch a deal with the new reality. Nothing daft. He didn't barter his youth, as many did, for a barge on the Shannon or a conservatory extension or an interior decorator or a rotary milking parlour or a personal stylist. No, he wanted a college education. A new way of life, less like subsistence, one that didn't stink of fear and survival. He did fast maths on how the island was transfiguring. One of them scenarios like, if a train is going at such and such a pace in the direction of a stone wall, but it's absolute gas crack on the train, what are your options? And I'll leave it there and swap it over to you, Mona.
Oh, that was so great. What a fantastic opening. So excited to talk with you about this wonderful book. So I'm going to read a little bit from All's Well and All's Well. And I think I'll read from the opening too. So just to for people who are just joining us and just to quickly give context, the story is set at a New England college, and it's about a theater professor named Miranda Fitch, who is struggling with chronic pain that no one believes she has. And she is hell-bent on staging a student production of Shakespeare's All's Well That Ends Well. But her students are mutinous and they want Macbeth. So at the moment she is in her office about to go down to rehearsal, but just lying there trying to like brace herself for it. And she's in pain and, you know, she's feeling all the feelings. So I'll just read from the opening. I'm lying on the floor watching, against my will, a bad actress in a drug commercial tell me about her fake pain. Just because my pain is invisible, she pleads to the camera, doesn't mean it isn't real. And then she attempts a face of what I presume to be her invisible suffering. Her brow furrows as though she's about to take a difficult shit, or else have a furious but forgettable orgasm. Her mouth is a thin grimace. Her dim eyes attempt to accuse something vague in the distance, a god perhaps. Her bloodless complexion is convincing, though they probably achieved this with makeup and lighting. You can do a lot with makeup and lighting, I have learned. Now I watch her rub her shoulder where this invisible pain supposedly lives. Her face says that clearly her rubbing has done nothing. Her pain is still there, of course, deep, deep inside her. And then I am shown how deep. I am shown her supposed insides. A see-through human body appears on my laptop screen, showcasing a central nervous system that looks like a network of angry red webs. The webs blink on and off like Christmas lights because the nerves are overactive, apparently. This is why she suffers so. Now the camera cuts back to the woman, gray-faced, hunched in the front yard of her suburban home. Her blonde children clamor around her like little jumping demons. They are oblivious to her suffering, to the red webs inside of her. She looks imploringly at the camera, at me really, for this is a targeted ad based on all of my web searches, based on my keywords, the ones I typed into Google in the days when I was still diagnosing myself. She looks withered but desperate, pleading. She wants something from me. She is asking me to believe her about her pain. I don't, of course. I lie here on my back on the roughly carpeted floor with my legs in the air at a right angle from my body. My calves rest on my office chair seat, feet dangling over the edge. One hand on my heart, the other on my diaphragm, cigarette in my mouth. Snow blows onto my face from an open window above me that I'm unable to close. Lying like this will supposedly help decompress my spine and let the muscles in my right leg unclench. Help the fist behind my knee to go slack so that when I stand up, I'll be able to straighten my leg and not hobble around like Richard III. This is a position that, according to Mark, I can supposedly go into for relief, self-care, a time out from life. I think of Mark of the dry needles, Mark of the scraping silver tools, his handsome bro face, a wall of certainty framed by a crew cut, ever nodding at my various complaints as though they are all part of a grand upward journey that we are taking together, Mark and I. I lie like this and I do not feel relief. Left hip down to the knee still on vague fire, a fist in my mid-back that won't unclench. Right leg is concrete all the way to my foot, which, even though it's in the air, is still screaming as if crushed by some terrible weight. I picture the leg of a chair pressing onto my foot, a chair being sat on by a very fat man. The fat man is a sadist. He is smiling at me. His smile says, I shall sit here forever, here with you on the third floor of this dubious college where you are dubiously employed. Theater studies, one of two sad concrete rooms in the English department. Your office, I presume? Rather shabby. Downstairs in the sorry excuse for a theater, they're waiting for me. Where is Miss Fitch already? She should be here by now, shouldn't she? Rehearsals begin, well, now. Maybe she's sick or something. Maybe she's drunk or on drugs or something. Maybe she went insane. I picture them, my students, sitting on the stage, swinging long, pliant legs over the edge, young faces glowing with health as though they were spawned by the sun itself, waiting for my misshapen body to hobble through the double doors, quietly cursing my name as we speak, about to declare mutiny any minute now. And I will leave it there.
Just unmute myself for a little. Well, we should rip the Band-Aid off in the fact that we both open our novels with pain. And I think, you know, yours is incredibly legitimately done. It's very convincing. It reminded me, you know, of the opening of Waiting for Godot with is it Vladimir or Estragon, and his boot, you know, he's trying to get off his boot. That's the opening gesture.
Right.
Because of his foot, and then it goes on and on and on. It comes back up and on again and again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's fixated for sure.
Yeah.
My God, that was like one of the first plays that I remember I read on the sly in the library, waiting for God.
On the sly because he, you know, he was a mortifying person to be reading, or
No, I mean, we just didn't read that in high school in Canada, you know, but this girl that I thought was like the coolest girl, like in my class, she was a really big Beckett fan. So I remember going to the library because I wanted to read what she was reading. So I read.
And what was your kind of the famous response in Irish theatre to that play? Is at the end, you know, when the people coming out of the play, and I think it was the Abbey, wherever it was first staged, and someone saying, "Nothing happened twice." Were you baffled?
I was totally baffled, but I loved it. I remember I loved it, and it's what made me want to write. I loved the dialogues. I'd always written dialogue before. That's kind of how I got into storytelling. So there was something just really exciting about Beckett's dialogues, and they were just so dark and nonsensical, but like so funny in a grim way it was exciting. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the pain in your book is not funny and funny and funny, not funny. Maybe is there, you know, do you kind of like to talk about the importance of that, the centrality of that, because you do give it quite a chunk. I mean, as a writer, I was you know, really admiring of that, because that's, you know, if you're in the writing seat there, that you page by page will feel the readers fall away from the manuscript, you know, and you're trying to find that point where, because of course it's embodying the experience of having chronic pain, and that it goes on, and that, you know, and so you know, the reader kind of, I think, knows, you know, by the packaging of the book and by, you know, descriptions around the book, that there's going to be some payoff at some point where there's a shift in gears. But was it you know, was that really important to you to write that experience?
Yeah, I think it really was, because you know, it is, as you say, it's something that people live with every day. It doesn't go away. You know, there's a shelf life to everybody else's ability to take it. There's a shelf life to our empathy. But the idea was to kind of embody the consciousness, to occupy the consciousness of somebody who can't escape it, is desperate to escape it, but absolutely can't. And then, you know, things shift, maybe the wheel of fortune turns. But yeah, I think in order to really, you know, do justice to what it's like to be in that kind of experience. I really wanted to stick with her.
Yeah, and
through all of the absurdities of
show
it.
people falling, kind of, loved ones falling out or running out of patience when,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I mean, it's interesting because you, what I loved this book so much, and this book also deals with illness, and in the book we're sort of occupying the 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 mind of somebody who is the caretaker. This is Hart. Hart is looking after his father, watching his father suffer. I loved Hart so much. He was such a compelling character, because he's able to see just so clear. His way of seeing the world is so wonderful. I felt like I knew him. I felt like you were channeling him. And I guess I wondered, how did he come to you? And how did you know that you wanted to tell this story from his particular perspective?
I never know what story I'm telling when I start. So I really had no idea what his story would be. And I've never written anything in first person besides this novel. And now kind of I wish I could. I wish it was the mode that I typically feel drawn toward, but it's not. And I found it a lot easier than my other points of view. But right. I know that it's not my natural point of view, so you can't force it. But with this book, it very much arrived as a in his voice, and it was all I had really was the sense of somebody having this desperate need for their story to be told, and to control the narration, to get to have the audience member or members sitting in a room with the door, like a lock-in, like a pub lock-in, that someone's going to tell you their ghost story, and then of course that's connected to I don't mind kind of giving away the fact that there's a euthanasia in the book, and that I think that's connected because it's about your controlling your own narrative to a degree, and then having some kind of say in how that narrative concludes without the threat of eternal damnation, which has a parallel to the conditions that Hart is telling his story in as well.
Right.
It sounds like straight away. I had no idea what would happen in the novel, but
you didn't.
No clue. I never know. And like Mona, sometimes, when I'm not writing, if I'm just like talking about books, I kind of get kind of bravado about the method, but now that I'm like 50,000 words, in a novel, and I have no idea what's going to happen on the next page. Like it's the most pukey, awful, unrecommendable way of writing.
But it's so exciting because you stumble upon things like, there's this great scene. Oh my God. I was going to ask you about this later, but now I want to ask now that I know that you kind of just move from moment to moment and you don't plot.
No.
Yeah. There's this incredible scene with a priest in this book, a confession. And there's such a dark twist. I'm not going to reveal it because I feel like it's one of the gems of the book, that scene, in my opinion anyway, where the priest sort of reveals himself to be a very puzzling, a very enigmatic figure, somewhat sinister. I guess I did that. First of all, just as a writer, I'm curious if that scene surprised you, but I'm also wondering about the role of the church and Catholicism in the story and how that might have informed that characterization, which I just found so like interesting, because his morality was always ambiguous to me, and I felt very like pleasantly ambivalent about him throughout the whole. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because like I'm very pro euthanasia, and I'm very down on the church, and you would never know. Like you can never. Unfortunately, that's one thing. I think Shakespeare had to do it because he was under threat of death and and all sorts of violences. I have no such threats, thank goodness. But I still do kind of tend to somehow end up obscuring my own politics, intentionally or not. But yeah, he comes off so, to me, he he has such humanity in the book that it's not what I would have designed. It wasn't convenient.
Yeah.
But this is what happens, you know. In real life, I'm a terrible judge of character, actually in my writing as well, I'm a very bad judge of character, and it's very helpful. In life, it's awful and it's dangerous. In fiction, it's brilliant, because, you know, there's always that chance that I could be 100% wrong, and that I won't have, you know, set it up for that to be the case. Like, I won't be tricking myself. That's just, I'll genuinely believe that a character is a certain way, until they're not at all, or I've totally misunderstood. But one of the things you mentioned there about about, I guess, his role, the priest's role, and what, you know, the Catholic aspects of the book kind of are, they're very much tied to the economic context as well. So because the boom years in Ireland were so short-lived, it was a really kind of impoverished country. You know, through its independence, its new state, you know, from the 20s in Ireland, and it was, a mass emigration through the 50s and 60s, and it was really, really grim. Like, you know, I could tell stories from my own family, but I mean, they're not my stories to tell. And then you had Ireland joining the EEC, and there was a lot of deregulation of property and banking, and there was a bunch of things that all happened together in the 80s and 90s that meant that, in foreign direct investment, that meant that, you know, there was this boom, but there was unprecedented. There'd never been a kind of economic growth in a country like it ever in the world, you know. So it was totally unprecedented, and it resulted in the biggest bailout in human history. The scale of it is just so massive. So obviously it aligns with what was, you know, going on in the US, and you're Canadian, right? But the scale of it was so different. And so when you're in a post-colonial state, and you have just, you know, in kind of still, it's less than 100 years of independence, and you have just managed to reach a point where you're being looked up to by other European countries, and, you know, as a model kind of, and then it all collapses. You know, of course, it's close enough to the history that you're going to feel that that you're returning to kind of your, you know, untamed, undisciplined, amoral state, and what you need is austerity and discipline, and, you know, all those paternalistic and which kind of transitioned from being, you know, the church state dynamic to being the kind of neoliberal corporate dynamic. And so it's you know, it's funny, because I think when the church stuff comes up with Irish novels, people often think that means that there's something, you know, like they're very historical, or there's something that maybe, you know, that's not that contemporary about them. But it's the transition, I think, that's I'm trying to think whether or not there's kind of the ethics in your book are very interesting, almost by the fact that they're, you know, there's a kind of a wry, you know, slightly bitter quality to to the protagonist, especially in the first part of the book. And then what I love actually about this story is that it really is about a woman's ambition and kind of a woman's drive, and those stories are incredibly rare. And, you know, where the character isn't being kind of used as some kind of, you know, she's not met with comeuppance for her behavior. You know, she's already in this situation to begin with, and we don't necessarily know whether she deserves to come out of it. Were you kind of, you know, you didn't base this novel on a morality play, but you did on the problem plays, which is a genre that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because I think it's such a brilliant genre, and maybe it freed you of kind of moralistic obligations.
I think it did. I really think it did. And, you know, Helen is a very, you know, the book is drawn from two plays, All's Well That Ends Well and then Macbeth. All's Well is the play that she is desperate to stage because it's a comedy with a happy ending, and she is very irrationally attached to it. And then Macbeth is the play that her students want, and she doesn't want that play, but she ends up kind of living it off stage. It's the play that she is inside of, that she has no control over. She's not the director of that, you know. So it's, you know, comedy on stage, problematic comedy on stage, tragedy off stage. But All's Well is a very disturbing comedy. It's you know, Helen is a very strange character. A lot of people perceive her to be a villain, you know, that she's very witchy and mysterious, and it's kind of insane to like pursue this man who doesn't want you, and then do all this trickery and clever wenchery to get him. And does she really get him at the end? We don't know, you know. Bertram is supposed to kind of declare his, you know, his love for her in one line. He's the actor who plays Bertram only has one line to do it. And, you know, you can play that line a number of different ways. So you don't really know if Helen got her desire like met. We don't really know that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, you know, it's interesting to me. But what excited me about the play is that she is such a polarizing figure, that she does have so much desire that she discloses so openly to the audience at the start, that she declares herself to really be powerless, but then she claims a kind of agency. And then the way she goes about claiming the agency and making her wish come true is kind of fairy tale-ish and magical and tricksterish. And I loved that energy that she had. She is a morally ambiguous character.
Yeah.
We are very free to see her in a number of different ways, and that was really exciting to me, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt like there was some fun to be had there, you know, some dark humor.
Yeah. And there's also, you know, that I think the thing that differentiates your protagonist from the Helen of All's Well That Ends Well is that she is longing for her former self, like you know, as if her ideal is actually herself. There's that kind of hint of narcissism there, which I think really kind of overlaps with my protagonist. He does have this, like, the tragic, melancholic, extremely handsome, self-professed you know, bachelor dreaming of America. You know, this is a kind of a figure that he's stepping into that, you know, is coming with all of these echoes, and with Miriam, isn't it? It's Miranda. Sorry, I was having a stupid brain blank. With Miranda, you know, she had been an actress, and she had been, you know, her career had been going very well until this tragic accident, and she's become kind of completely destroyed by it, and kind of you know, on a deep psychological level. But she does aspire to revert back, you know, to have her old husband.
Yes.
You know, did you ever toy with like it going a different way, where there might be, I don't know, but yeah, because I guess I don't want to spoil anything, but you know, it doesn't go back in time. You know, she doesn't you know, become younger and
no.
So yeah, I'm interested in what did you know at the outset that this was going to be a play that would investigate chronic pain, that was about a theater director, where it was going to have a play within a play, which is a very Shakespearean thing, and then this larger play that's influencing what's going on in the protagonist's life. And did you choose those plays kind of strategically?
I did choose plays strategically, but I didn't know all of it at first. I knew that I wanted to write about a director who was fixated with Helen because of her own stuff, you know, and that she desperately wanted to put on this particular play. So All's Well was the first play, but as I was kind of working with it, I was also reading Macbeth, and I just saw so many crossovers between the two, and the two central ones really are just that both Helen and Macbeth have a desire that can't be realized within the world of the play when the play begins. And they both have to take a kind of transgressive action to make it manifest. And in the case of Helen, a king has to be healed. But in the case of Macbeth, a king is murdered. So one goes down the road of comedy and one goes down the road of tragedy. So I did know, I did, and I, Helen's way of getting her desire is so mysterious that there's room for the witches to kind of, cross over into the world of All's Well, I think. So that was exciting to me. And so that sort of tragedy and comedy, which I think the wild laughter also has. It has that it has such dark humor. I mean, I was delighted to find humor in scenes that were, extremely, they were very moving. Some of them very dark, some of them very sinister. There's always kind of like this, there was always like a moment of like brightness that surprised me and delighted me, or a moment of humor. So I'm curious about your relationship to humor as a writer, particularly given the title. I wonder how the title came to you.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I mean, I think I write, I write for humor. I think it's really important to me. I'm not a funny person at all, and it's kind of even a joke among my own siblings, but which I bring up all the time, because I think it's funny, which is inherently not funny, but but I really enjoy, like, I think humor is the gift of life. Like, I think it's the best thing that there is, and the only thing that really matters. and that's what kind of where love comes from, and those overlapping humors, and so when I, if I do sit down with to write a scene, or to write a story, or to write a book, it's often because there'll be some kind of character that's come to mind, that either the situation they're in, or something about their sensibility. I mean, people do probably all the characters I write are quite divisive, and they're probably quite marmitey. So I think Irish and UK readers so far have definitely found it very funny. And on the US, I'm not quite sure. I can't quite tell. It seems to be a hit and miss. But I'm glad that you found it funny.
But I found it so funny. I loved it so much. I was curious. I mean, the scene that actually uses the phrase the wild laughter is I mean, there's so many layers of emotion going on in that scene.
The title you did mention, sorry, is it's from Love's Labour is Lost.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It is, yeah. So for the audience members who don't know that play, it's one of his lesser known plays, a comedy. It's even less known, I think, than All's Well. It although I was just listening to a podcast actually with an Afghan writer, Akbar Omar. I don't think I've pronounced his first name right, but he was involved with a production in Afghanistan of Love's Labour is Lost in I think 2005, during a period between the Taliban, and it didn't get to continue its performances. It was just incredible to kind of think about that, and the choices, that the reason why that play had been chosen. And it's because it's a king and his three, I think, friends who they're all studying philosophy, and they decide to be celibate for 4 years, and to only eat one meal a day. And anyway, lo and behold, so 4 single ladies rock up into their worlds conveniently, and they at one point, so later in the play, so this has to do with the women come out, like the women come out really strong in the play, and they get to kind of dictate what will happen.
Oh, sounds great.
So I think this was the reason why Akbar Omar was while they had chosen it, his explanation. but okay, so the title, Lord Byron is trying to woo the lady that's that he's trying to woo, and he is renowned for his wit, and so she tasks him with spending a month at in a hospice, making people on their deathbed laugh, and he says to move wild laughter in the throat of death, that cannot be, it is impossible. Mirth cannot move a soul in agony. And I think it's like that moment in that play where like all of the comedy, for me, it's like, I think you write books for these, these moments. And I think that must have been because that's Shakespeare's battle with himself.
Right.
There. He desperately needs it to be, to be relevant, because however many plays you write during plague years and make people in pandemics in 2021 feel absolutely crap about themselves, you still writing a play still takes a lot of effort, and you hope that you can move wild laughter in whatever throes of pain people are in.
I love that so much, and that just captures too the symbiotic relationship between the two, that you really can't, I don't think you can have one without the other. So yeah, I think that's beautiful, and that works so beautifully for your book too. We have a lot of questions, so I feel like, okay, I want to ask you one more, and then maybe we should move over to the Q&A. We'll see, because we have like 6. I was going to ask you about theater, because theater is in your book as well. And I was curious about the love interest. And I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't read this book. It's so wonderful. But the love interest is an actor. And I guess I was curious about what drew you to include the world of theater in the book, and to make the love interest an actor.
Yeah, and my mum was an actor, and my sister is an actor. In fact, she's in a play in Rhode Island right now. She lives over there, and so I'm like really sad that I can't be there to go see it. But she's on stage, I think, right now, which is just so wonderful. Actors' lives, that you can't always guarantee they're on stage. So it's wonderful. But so there's that. But I studied, I never had any interest in performance myself, but I studied theatre. I did a master's in 20th century Irish theatre and culture. And so I'm interested in the play, and the production of a play, and just that whole mode. I love dialogue. I'm not, massively interested in plot. I'm interested in people. And so when you get people together, I'm there. I'll go if I can afford to. But the first thing I ever wrote was like a pastiche of Father Ted when I was 10. I think.
Oh my God, I was thinking about Father Ted when I was reading the book. I was thinking about it because the dialogue is so great in Father Ted, and you have your dialogue is fantastic. I love the dialogue, and it's in so many different contexts, and it's always so brilliantly done. Yeah.
Thank you. You're also, I mean, I could ask the same question of you, the theater background. You have a PhD, am I right? In
English and creative writing. It's sort of one of those, it's a joint, like joint 2 fields of study in one. So my dissertation was a novel, but I also had to write a critical preface and do comps and all of that stuff. But theater came from, and I did choose Shakespeare as my major figure, but I looked at plays with supernatural elements in them. That's what I kind of focused on, because I was interested in that. How do you stage the supernatural? And I'm so fascinated by that. But yeah, I mean, I loved theater in high school so much, and I used to write. That was the only thing that kind of kept me in school, was like writing for the drama club,
Oh wow.
So
what power.
I know that there's so much energy in dialogue. It's surprising, That's the thing, is there's just so much room for surprise and for like delights to happen, and for people to reveal themselves in ways that they don't intend. And I don't know, it's so great.
I mean, it's fun. Yeah, the power stuff with being a writer versus kind of, you know, being involved in a play. You know, I don't know I mean, actors, it's one of the you know, the most brave kind of art forms you can get involved in, because you're beholden to so many different tensions.
Yeah.
You know, and from the history of a play text to the director, to the audience, to the character, to the scene, to the sentence, you know. And so it's insane. And whereas with you know, with us, you know, we're only beholden to one reader if we have one.
That's right.
um
Yeah, you're right. It's a totally different kind of experience. We have a lot more power, and maybe a lot more freedom too, you know.
yeah.
Um, I'm curious about, I guess, one more thing before we move to questions. There's just one more question. The book deals heavily with assisted suicide. I don't think that that's a spoiler. And I believe that it was, I might be wrong about this, so forgive me, but it was inspired or drawn from a real case. Is that true?
No,
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 no.
it's not. I wanted to acknowledge Marie
Okay.
had challenged the national constitution for a right to die. Basically, she knew that it would not be successful, but she wanted to kind of start a dialogue and to free her husband from being, you know, implicated. Um, and so I've acknowledged her, but no, there's never been a case like oh well, now I maybe yeah, I'm gonna really spoil things, but no, I mean, the problem with saying that there's euthanasia in the novel is that no one will buy it. But I promise you this, I promise you that was just like the challenge, you know, the challenge that I, you know, ended up tasking myself with, that the self-loathing and all of the demons in me tasked
Yeah.
myself with, you know. And and if you can overcome that, you can overcome anything. Surely, if you've written a novel about centers on a euthanasia case and on chronic pain, you know,
Yeah.
high five to us.
I think so too. I think, yeah, I really think it's phenomenal. I just love it so much, and it's such a universal story. You know, there's so many aspects of it that are universal. You know, two warring brothers. It's a coming of age in an economically depressed world with little opportunity, and it's about, you know, filial obligation and kind of the shadow side of that, and dealing with a, you know, a very ill parent, and yet it's so anchored to place. And I'm interested. It was set in the county of Roscommon. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you chose Roscommon as the county?
Because it's landlocked and
Okay.
it's right adjacent to where I grew up. So I mean, I was on the coast in Galway, but it's a small island. So landlocked in the Ireland doesn't mean what landlocked means in the US. But for
Right.
me, for whatever psychological reason, landlocked meant something. I lived in San Francisco for like a J1 visa when I was, you know, 17 or something, over the course of the summer, and all I did was write poems and sit on street corners, like listening to people reading, reciting their poems. And I just remember this one guy, and his poem was really good, except it had this refrain, which was landlocked places are hell. Landlocked places are hell, and he kept saying it, and I was thinking, like, that's not your best line. There, don't make that your refrain. But it really stuck with me. But so maybe that was echoing in.
Yeah.
No, the reason is that I needed it to be the type of terrain that you would have a potato farm, and that was, you know, quite boggy in the adjacent area. I wanted it to be very wet. I wanted for Hart to be able to externalize what he was, the kind of trappedness that he maybe that he has, or maybe that he thinks that he has. And I didn't know if the mother character had ever been to the ocean. So that when I started the novel, it was actually, I had a much stronger set. I know the mother character much more than the book gets to know her, because we only get to see everyone through Hart's perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. She's only glimpsed, but she's so fascinating. I mean, she could be her own novel someday if you feel like writing it. I feel like that would be, she is fascinating to me. But yeah, in the context of the story, it's great. It's so great to be with Hart. Okay, I'll see what questions we have, because we have quite a few. Let's see here. Okay. Both of you write such rich, fleshed out characters. What's your approach to building a fictional figure in such an intimate way?
Yeah, you do this. I mean,
Okay.
you do this point of view thing, which is with the story that I think has got to be like the intimacy of it is like a punishment at the beginning, and then it isn't it isn't, and I love that because it echoes the challenge that the reader's being tasked with, to sympathize. Can you empathize? Can you
Right.
sit through another explanation of an undesignated pain, or but yeah, have you got a typical approach?
I don't really, but I did feel like the voice is kind of the first thing that comes. If it doesn't come, it's so scary. If I have a sense of the story and I don't have a sense of the character's voice, I'm really scared. But in the case of All's Well, the voice did come pretty quickly. I knew that she was going to be talking to a kind of invisible audience because she's a former actor, right? And so in her head, there's always an audience that she's just trying to, speak to intimately, disclose, gain their sympathy, gain their complicity,
Yeah.
And so I had a sense of how the voice would come, but it was hard. It was hard to stay in that headspace.
Well, I think the interesting choice that you made there is that you said that you wanted to stay in there and have the reader complicit with her, and I think most writers, their position would be to have readers, the temptation would be to have her justify her behavior more, and she doesn't do that at all, and I find that really refreshing.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that the intimacy, the disclosure is the kind of extended hand to the audience. It's the act of disclosing so intimately without censoring. That was actually very fun, that part. But the voice is always the thing that freaks me out because I think it's intuitive. I mean, how is it for you? Because Hart is so richly imagined.
Well, I'm just thinking now. I'm writing a novel with 4 central characters.
Oh my goodness! And all first person?
No, none of them are first person. No, I wish they were. I think it would be easier, but no, I can't do that. So no, it's awful. Don't do anything I do. But yes, voices. Yeah, like I think for me, I don't think about it as voice. I think about it as tone.
Yeah.
Because, for example, with short stories, I think like I've written more short stories than I have novels, so I can count more experiences that I've had, and certainly it is hitting on that tone, that because everything is embodied in the tone. It's a bit like a key signature in a piece of music, like a really unusual key signature, if there were more key signatures in music or something, or like a key signature for tenor oboe. Is a tenor oboe an instrument? All I'm saying is it's very specific and can only be played one way,
Right. Yes, no, you're so right. But it's hitting upon that tone. Is that intuitive? I mean, yeah. How does it come to you? Does it come to you because I know did you start as a poet?
I did, yeah. And I think it comes from that in the sense that I would never have thought of kind of designing a poem or something before writing it, and so that was the way that I started writing fiction. Was one line to the next, and so I often have a really long gestation period. Not that I'm building up anything. I don't take any notes. I have nothing. I'm kind of like I'm naked, and with the entry point, and it's awful. Every time it's awful, and I say never again. But but the long waiting, I guess on some subconscious level, there has been a closing in on something, and usually it's in the case of this novel now that I'm writing. I tried not to write it for so long, and eventually my Dutch friend said to me, "But Caoilinn, there is something in your garden, and you have to water it, and you have to." And she said, "If you don't, nothing else can grow in the garden." She's like, "And you nurture it and grow it, and then it's done." And and I was kind of like, okay, and that was my way of going, of course she's right, like I have to, it's hard, it's going to be really hard, and it might be ugly and no one will like it. But I have no choice because there's something in the garden. And so and sometimes that's the tone, and so like it's just a problematic, thorny little sentence, and you have to I guess the privilege of being a redrafter is that, you can always find it halfway through and then, in the redraft.
That's true.
Is that your experience?
Yeah, it is. I thank goodness for revision because otherwise I don't know what I would do. I mean, I tend to write the first draft in one go. I do think a little bit about the story in advance, I have to say. But I will also say that when I don't, it is awful. And I feel like this had to happen in The Wild Laughter. I'm thinking about that scene with the priest. When you stumble upon something, when you discover something in the moment like that, it's got to be wonderful. Like, yes, it's awful. But
that's why you write. Yeah, that's why you write. And like sometimes it's something like, for me, one of those moments was at some point Hart describes his mother as like, for a moment there, he's so harsh towards her, but he was like, for a moment there, like she'd softened, and then I caught her eyes with her, and all of a sudden she stiffened again, as if all of the potatoes she'd eaten throughout her lives had suddenly exuded their starch.
Yeah.
And like, that's not exactly how it's put, but like, and like that just, I mean, I did not set it on a potato farm for that line. But I was like, that, like, for me, it embodied everything about the way, like, what a cruel way to see somebody, and like how dehumanizing, but also like they're in it together, like they've both been on eating these potatoes, the ugly ones that the supermarket won't buy, and so like it's so those little moments that are, it's also kind of on a sentence level, but sometimes it happens on a story level. And it happened with my first book as well. The character was just going, in Orchid and the Wasp, was going to New York, and I was looking up what was happening in New York, in case there was something going on historically in the period that might interrupt her flight or something. And then Occupy Wall Street was there, and it just made a lot of sense for it to be in the novel. So that was kind of like one of those, you can't plan it.
And it just happened. Okay, we have quite a few here. Let me see.
We've probably only got time for one.
I think we have time for one. You choose it, Caoilinn, because I chose the last one. You go through. Choose the one that you
want. Okay, well, I'd love to see either of you write realistic fiction about an event in popular history. If you could write a narrative around any piece of popular history, what would you choose? Popular history. Does that mean history that everyone liked?
Oh geez, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm less inclined to write. I tend to write about write realism, and and base everything in stuff that's going on. But I don't tend to have to do like to put myself in a situation where I have to do research, because I just procrastinate, and I would use it as a great excuse to do that and not write any books.
Yes, me too. I think that's research leads me down. I actually did write a book that will never see the light of day, that I had to research, and I researched for years. And I mean, that's all I have are those binders with my notes. I don't have anything else.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of
I guess everyone says to you that maybe someday they'll.
Yeah, but they're wrong. I'm not going to. It's not good. It's definitely not good. And yeah, so I would say no.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're so glad that any manuscript the two of you might have had in writing both The Wild Laughter and All's Well resulted in these great books. Our thanks to Caoilinn Hughes and Mona Awad, and to our friends again at the Embassy of Ireland, Solus Nua, and Georgetown Irish Studies. This has been such a delightful evening. We encourage everyone to follow the link in the chat to get your copies of these books from Politics and Prose, because we can't host these great author talks without the book sales to support them. So you can either follow the link in the chat or visit us online at politics-prose.com. While you're there, check out the rest of our events calendar for everything else we've got coming up. And from our shelves to yours, we hope everyone out there is staying safe, staying strong, and of course, staying well read. and we will see you next time. Caoilinn and Mona, thank you again.